What's going on? Boys, arm yourselves. Life stuff. 3 things today. We are going to try to get through them quickly because I was not expecting to make this video. Section 1, one of the reasons why you engage with magical materials. I'm working my way through some of Peter Carroll's stuff, and I'm liking it. Reading Shardle first turned out to be useful. Now, between all the corruption and other people's paths and answers versus your path and answers, not everything in these texts is going to apply to you, nor should you try to apply everything someone writes. But what you're doing is building a base. You have your capacity for understanding, you have your path toward understanding more, and you have your assignment. You don't need texts or other people's perspectives to figure out your shit. But by reading them, listening to them, you can build up a context. On the mystical, cosmic scale, what are people concerned with? What do they think about it? And what are they doing about it? You might find none of these things line up with you, but that's okay. You're immersing yourself. And when you immerse yourself, you never know what is going to brush against your leg in the water. To cut the bullshit and make it very simple, because we're bullshitting today, I'm walking around with a gun in a pirate's wife beater. It's a weird day. You are gathering ideas and opening yourself up to mercies and breakthroughs. You can find the straight path without a book, and you probably should, but it's hard to hit a home run if you aren't on the field. And that leads us into part 2, something that hit me this evening. Not the ultimate truth, not even an answer, probably, but a way of looking at things. You need to play a collectible card game with reasonable perspectives. And when I say perspective, I don't just mean what someone else thinks. I mean places you can stand to look at the same thing differently and extract value from your looking. You can't die because you weren't born. Old PJ pulled out the fucking balance playbook on me, and I can't tell if he's screwing with me. One of the things I've learned when it comes to mystical shit is everyone's a prankster. Everyone is screwing with you at all times. So is PJ talking balance seriously, unironically, which is one of the many signs of corruption? Be very careful, keep your eyes open. Or is he screwing with you by sticking one of his little testes in your face and asking you to grapple with some concepts? I'm not sure yet. But in wrestling with those concepts and being a bit annoyed, because up to this point, even if not everything applies to me, this stuff is golden, for the most part. Probably made more accessible by Shardle's nth dimensional screaming in your face. Balance. Old PJ says everything should be balanced. But we've already established we live in the world of is. Our entire existence is, because anything that isn't is, isn't, and we perceive isn't as a negation, and that's when it hit me. I think there are a few fundamental mistakes we make as perceiving sentient beings. One, we mistake negation with absence. 2, we mistake change with death. What am I talking about? Well, if we live in is, if we is, then we not is not. And PJ talks about dichotomy just a lot, like I'm listening to Anakin. If we live in if we live in is, then we do not live in is not. Meaning everything we experience, can think, everything, including absence, is on this side. And we mistakenly assume the absence of something is that other side. But it isn't. Isn't, isn't. Isn't, isn't absence. Isn't is isn't. And absence, despite being an absence, is part of is. It is and is. Now, I meant to hold off on PJ's writings for its own video, but to get into a little bit of it, PJ says we live in a dualistic existence fashioned by something non-dualistic. That's what chaos is. They call it chaos because it is irrational. It doesn't abide. And we talked about similar concerns 3 minutes ago. Chaos is their fundamental concept, but they conceptualize it as a force. We call our idea of it the monad, and we conceptualize it as a question. It might be a force, but the question it poses is a lot more important. To us, anyway. And PJ says we fall out of dualism or rise out of dualism, but he phrases it most often like a fall, back into non-dualism. The thing that can't reference because it is non-dualistic and has no other thing to reference itself against. But that's weird to me. Maybe I'm misunderstanding. Probably I'm misunderstanding. I'm hoping there'll be more upon further reading and upon further reflection. But the non-dualistic sounds like it is dualistic because the non-dualistic defines itself by the dualistic. But that maybe is just part of our limited understanding as dualistic beings. That is probably what's going on. But the way he phrases it is annoying. Anyway, in the words of a humble guardsman, I'm not totally sold on the whole chaos thing, so let's get back to is not. So we perceive negation, or this... We perceive the lack of something as nothing. But if everything we experience is on the is side of existence, or reality, whatever you want to call it, then the lack of something or the loss of something is not nothing. Because we can experience it. We can experience non-experience. Whatever our actual negation is, or is not, is beyond our understanding. Because we can understand loss and absence. And that leads into the question, what happens to our ego, our soul, or our consciousness when we die looking at things from this point of view? Do we enter isn't? No, I think. Because we is. Because we be, we always was, and we always will is. Birth and death, negations, are a human's misconception of change. A human thinks people start to be when they're born or when they're conceived. Words are fun. And stop to be when they die. But it's all happening on the is side of things. Meaning, components of the is were A, they became B, you, and when you die, they become C. You are not you. You are elements of totality composed a certain way. You were composed a certain way before you were born. You are composed as you now, and you will be composed as something else later. And then you say, okay, but what about consciousness? That is an adjective-y way of looking at things, but my ego is important to me, and it should be. Your consciousness is as elemental to totality as your biology is. The material was something else, turned into you, and will turn into something else when you die. Your consciousness does the same thing. Consciousness always was, is, and always will be. Because it's on the is side of things. There aren't differences in is. Even separating consciousness from biology is a mistake, because it's just one is. And on the other side is an isn't we don't understand and will never understand. But it isn't an absence, because absence is part of is. Nothing isn't nothing. And I'm aware Lil PJ comments on this. Yeah, in that... There it is. I am that I am not. But that feels like it's fucking with me. So much of mystical study is one person who has apprehended something misleading as many people as humanly possible before they can't anymore. But anyway, looking at it from this perspective, you are a product. You aren't even really a product of change. You are a symptom of change. Or the you think you are. Because you are that changing force. That's why I said you can't die. And I think that is also why PJ is so invested in change, reinvention, transmogrification, etc. Like, choosing change is getting back in touch with yourself, but if you were designed, or the consequence of your existence led you not ever to want to change, how can that be a mistake? I'm not the biggest fan of the I have an answer for everything people, if that is what young PJ is. And I want to reiterate, so I don't put words in chaos magicians' mouths, this is not shit, is not what they are claiming. They're claiming dualism and non-dualism, or at least that's what they appear to be claiming. This is not shit, and all the misapprehensions humans make are what struck me while I was reading their stuff. And do I agree with anything we have spent the last 10 minutes talking about? Some of it. Nothing isn't nothing feels like a small breakthrough. Everything is change feels like revisiting an old path we were walking. I distinctly remember, we've been talking about change a bit recently, but I distinctly remember a video in which we discussed change as one of a few fundamental forces. And here we've iterated on the idea of it a bit more. Our idea of it anyway. You were never born, you can't die. That's reasonable, but it feels like bullshit for us, because ego, you are so important to our understanding of the world. And not in a we've failed sort of way. There is something here that needs you as this little point in infinity to be as great as you can be. And to be great, borrowing their phrase of a sentiment we hold dear, without lust of result. That doesn't change the fact, change, ironically, doesn't change the fact change is a fundamental force, that there is an irrationality underlying everything, but it is all perspectives. And to borrow, love this little snippet from McKenna, why have only one answer? I have a feeling there are a bunch of answers, all completely contradictory. I suppose I was not expecting chaos magic to claim to have solid answers. Not that all their solid answers, especially their toolish answers, are bad. Part 3 or Section 3 is about sigils, and while not everything in this book has resonated with me, sigils make a lot of sense. Sigils feel like what we're doing. We mentioned that in the last video. And I'll probably talk about it more at length in another video, but the basic idea they are forwarding about sigils is getting the unconscious working. Reality bends when you are thinking about something but not thinking about something. And again, here, I am not saying what they are saying directly. I'm going to use the word willpower, and they made a point of saying they hate willpower, or the word willpower. So, this is not going to be correct. This is my understanding. This is the way we are using these things. And I think I've just stumbled into the trick of saying you don't want to misquote someone, so you can say probably 70% of what they were saying, while people might mistake you for saying what you mean, not what they mean. It's a way of stealing without it seeming like stealing, or with it seeming polite even. So you draw a picture symbolizing what you want, and write some words stating what you want. Then you scramble the elements of the picture until they look properly magical, and then you scramble up the words a bit until they sound magical, and then you create this focusing of will. Then you scramble it, so now all you have are symbols reminiscent of the will, but still representing the will. And then you focus on the sigil and the magic words until you have forgotten their original meaning, or they have taken on new meanings, but they are not. When you focus on the sigil and the magical words, you are not focusing on the initial will. Thereby, as time passes, you are thinking about this without thinking about it, and your unconscious, or they call it the Kia, makes those changes in reality. And I totally agree with that. My difference being, I don't necessarily think you need to try to forget entirely. I think as long as you're acting without expecting something, without expecting a solution or a salvation maybe, your unconscious or your demon, your god, might show you mercy and bend some reality around you. And I have made 3 sigils, and I'm probably going to turn them into stickers, because the best thing you can do off magic is profit. But I want you to look upon these bastardized sigils. We'll look through them and do some stuff. Now this first sigil here carries 2 magical phrases, OTALIDE and LITNIS KETHEL. Let's say them together. OTALIDE, LITNIS KETHEL. One more time. OTALIDE, LITNIS KETHEL. And, one more time for the road. OTALIDE, LITNIS KETHEL. Let these words and this image worm their ways into your skulls. I want you to find yourself saying these words 3 days from now. Now here's the second one. Same game. One image, 2 phrases. You're gonna love the first one. It looks like BOUMER, but we pronounce it BOUMER. Let's say them together. One more time, 3 times. BOUMER, FREO EYUR ALTH. BOUMER, FREO EYUR ALTH. BOUMER, FREO EYUR ALTH. Did you say them all 3 times? Kids, I hope you did. I think this is another talents, intuition thing. Some things naturally, righteously stick with you and work and others don't. Sigils, for me, I'm finding, seem to work. We were doing sigils before we knew what sigils were, really. And this is the last sigil, but it might be the most important. Once again, 1 image, 2 magical phrases. Perhaps the most important magical phrases, or at least one of them is. Let us say them 3 times together. FUCINI, FUJANI. FUCINI, FUJANI. FUCINI, FUJANI. And you can say that second phrase, magical word, there as many times as you'd like. Of all these, I would love for you to repeat all of them, get them all stuck in your head, because they just sound so cool, right? And there's this mystique to them. Oh, what's going on here? You know you want to keep saying those words and looking at these images. In fact, I might, in the description, put the PNGs available for download so you can have them and look at them and repeat the phrases whenever you want. But FUJANI. Let's do that 3 more times together. Why don't you say that 3 times? FUJANI, FUJANI, FUJANI. 3 more times. FUJANI, FUJANI, FUJANI. 3 more times. FUJANI, FUJANI, FUJANI. 3s and 3s. I really don't like Janie. But that doesn't matter. All that matters is we are now aware of sigil as practice, and in your heads now are 3 sigils we might find useful in the coming months. Like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you haven't.